Hey guys, it's Cameron for the three most recent episodes of Riverdale, episodes 3 through 5. And as you guys know, with the season starting, I was a bit hesitant with the way the season really started. I felt that 22 episodes seemed like it was way too much for them. It did not really seem like they were headed in a very positive direction, to say the least. It really seemed like they were dragging things out, and they were also ending things way too quickly. A lot of characters seemed like we're kind of struggling to have a plot. Betty specifically didn't really seem like she had much to do. So needless to say, I kind of fell behind mainly because I wasn't as interested. I kind of was worried the show was going to go through a bit of a sophomore slump. Needless to say, though, these past three episodes have laid a lot of groundwork, and it's been very positive groundwork. I think these three episodes really did restore my faith in the overall season, and that definitely bodes well, like I said, for the show from here on out, because there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in these three episodes, but there's also a lot going on within all three of them. So this is probably going to be one of my more lengthier videos. I know I've done a lot of these. I did one with Supergirl, I did one with American Horror Story Cult, and now I'm doing one with Riverdale. But Riverdale's probably going to be the longest of the three because there's just a lot to talk about. Like I said, there's a lot that goes on in these three episodes, and Riverdale is not the kind of show that you try to binge. I've said this a million times. It's not the kind of show that you want to binge and then you review. If you're reviewing it, you want to review each episode individually. So I'm probably going to talk about what happens in pretty much the entire episode for all three of these. Like I said, a lot really does go down. But let's just get here now, starting off with episode 3. Which, let me just say, like I said, episode 3 really, like I said, restored my faith in the show in a big way, and that's mainly because of what we get in this episode. We finally get a backstory with a character that we've been waiting for a while, and that being Kevin. Kevin, he was set up as a main character this season, and I was a bit worried because I was worried he was just going to be the sassy gay friend of Betty and Veronica, and that he'd be the one to go to for advice, and I didn't really see why he was a main character. This episode, now I get it. Now I get what they're trying to do, why he's a main character, and they really did show the potential that Casey that Casey Cott really does demonstrate as an actor, and he really did an incredible job in this episode. I really loved what he did here. I've always been a fan of Casey Cott, but he really killed it in this episode, because we start off, we see him, he's going through the woods, he meets this boy, they begin to hook up, they hear gunshots in the distance and follow them to find Midge, and it turns out Midge actually didn't die, which I was happy with. I was glad to see that Moose and Midge are still alive, because I really didn't care about them. Midge especially, I didn't feel much attachment towards, so I'm glad to see the show didn't just axe them off. And let me just say, the whole fear of me being worried they're going to kill someone off every episode, that was quickly, thrown out the window here, and I was definitely happy to see that. So immediately they know that, Midge was shot, and Archie immediately, points this back to the Black Hood, and thinking that, there has to be some sort of connection here, but Betty says, no, that's not happening, that's not really what's going on. And Archie walks in on Kevin. He's recounting an experience in the murder scene. He suggested there's a killer on the loose, but again, they don't believe that they're really connected at all. So basically, Betty ends up pulling Kevin aside and asks about his night jogging, and he reveals he was hooking up with a guy in Fox Force and promises to Betty that he's not going to do it again. And Cheryl hears this entire conversation in the background. So, obviously this isn't good news for Kevin. So they decide to visit Moose, Archie and Reggie, that is. They visit him in the ER, and Moose confirms that the assailant actually had a black hood, and Midge argues that he had dead eyes. So basically, Archie again thinks that this has to be the Black Hood who was attacking Moose and Midge, and he suggests that they buy a gun, and Fred disagrees. He really doesn't want to take action here. You can see that Fred is still very weak, but Archie is adamant about getting revenge, and that's something I really like about Archie throughout these three episodes. This season, it's focusing on Archie more prominently. He definitely has a bigger role this season, but that doesn't necessarily mean he is the hero of the show. He's not the hero of his own story, and I like the way the show is going that direction. Archie is a teenager. He doesn't make great decisions, and I like that they're sticking with that here, and especially when it comes to the safety of his friends. He wants to take action. He wants revenge, and this gets very he gets heavily involved in this, and he becomes obsessed with him. We're going to get into that more in the second episode, but it's one of my favorite things about these three episodes is that they didn't just make Archie this perfect hero. No, he is very complex. He is going through a lot, and he's not really thinking rationally at all. So Basically, Veronica invites all of them over to her house to get to know her father, and Archie complains that no one seems to believe his theory. Everyone else is thinking, oh, this isn't connected at all, it just happens to be a coincidence, and basically Veronica introduces Hiram and Hermione to her friends, and Hiram reveals that he heard Archie's conversation and argues that Archie needs to take matters into his own hands, and he invites Archie over to dinner to hear his plan. So basically, he finds a gun under a stack of Red Circle comics, and he studies them, and he argues that they need to start a watch group for Riverdale High to keep it safe, and he says that he doesn't want it to be violent, he just wants it to be a patrol, and he gives the group this name called the Red Circle, that they need to be they need to be keeping tabs on this Black Hood, they need to do what they can to make sure that the crime is prevented, but this is not going to go well at all. So Betty goes to Kevin and asks why he didn't go to Veronica's, because that's the only person that she invited over that didn't show up, and Kevin argues it's none of her business, but there's definitely more going on here, and Cheryl then asks Betty why she's bothered by it and argues that Kevin is actually hunting for validation, and that's really what's going on here. He also wants answers, and he wants to know really what's going on. So basically, Betty returns home. It turns out the package that she did was in fact a letter from the Black Hood, which he wants them to publish in the paper, and Betty questions if the letter's real, but Alice reveals what else in the package. You got Fred's wallet and Grundy's glasses, so again, this really seems to be kind of connecting, like Archie said. Maybe this does all kind of connect, and basically Archie's handing out flyers for the Red Circle. We see Sheriff Keller reads the letter from the Black Hood, and the letter argues that all of his acts are actually justified because he's targeting sinners, and Alice reveals they're putting the letter on the front page of the paper, so they're really starting to become very heavily involved, and Keller then asks Weatherby about the group. He argues that it actually is a good thing to maybe go after them. But this gets Polly the notion that maybe she should leave Riverdale, that maybe that might be the best thing for her to do because she and Jason, it's just not safe to be there. She wants to go to the farm that she and Jason wanted to go to. And she argues that the Black Hood would easily see her as a sinner, considering the fact that she's actually pregnant with Jason's child. So she wants to get as far away from there as possible. This kind of sets up Polly leaving. And I thought this was good. We didn't really see Polly in this season, since this episode. It makes sense why they did that. It made sense what they were saving for, and I thought it made sense that Polly does leave in this episode. I thought, it definitely was probably the right direction to take her character, because honestly, I really didn't want to see Polly die. I think it would have been a dumb move to do, so I'm glad to see they did find a way to keep her alive, but not have to use her a ton. I don't know if the actress has other commitments, but she is off the show pretty much as of this episode. She is off the show. But Kevin decides to visit Moose in the hospital. He asks Kevin what he was doing in the woods to begin with, and he tells Moose about his rendezvous in the woods. And Moose argues that it's worth going for, just to not feel alone. And Moose invites Kevin to hang with him whenever, basically. So, they make plans to hang out, and what ends up happening from here is Betty visits Jughead at the school paper, and we'll get to Jughead in a little bit. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on with Jughead in this episode, but basically, they end up tracking down Ethel, who's distraught over the car following her. They go into this group of guys into the woods, and Cheryl and Betty approach Kevin in the woods, and he asks Betty not to be a hypocrite about what he chooses to do, and wonders if she's really his friend. Again, Casey Cott in this scene, fantastic. I loved what he did here. And Betty cleans, we see basically Fred asks Archie about the dinner with the lodges. He tells Archie to be careful around Hiram, that he can't trust him. So they all sit at dinner. Hiram asks about the Ethel attack and then invites Archie to drink rum with him. Veronica invites herself in the room, but Hiram says no, it's just, needs to be a conversation between him and Archie. He doesn't want Veronica involved, obviously. So they're drinking in his study. He has Archie not to sneak into Veronica's room and not to hurt her. He then argues that Archie and the Red Circle need to strike back against the Black Hood, and they do, in fact, need to attack her. So again, he's encouraging Archie to get into a lot of nefarious, not nefarious, but very violent, treacherous activity, and that's something that you can tell Archie's very in over his head here, and he is very confident about. He's confident that they're going to come out okay. So Betty then goes to find Kevin. Kevin approaches the car in Fox Forest. The driver invites him to get in. Kevin does, and then he gets stabbed, and he flashes back to reality and declines getting into the car. So obviously, he's fearful that he's going to be the next target, and I really did like this scene. You can see he's really worried that it's going to happen to him, and the driver accosts him, but he runs away, and he returns home to find Keller waiting up for him, and he reveals that Betty told him the truth and asks him to stay safe with everything that's going on, and Keller then suggests the two of them be more honest with each other, and they do end up hugging there. So the next day, Veronica goes to Hiram, says that she wants a more active role in Lodge Industries, And, we see Betty tries to approach Kevin in the hallway. He's ignoring her. It's clear these two are really not on good terms at all. She wants him out of this while he wants to continue the investigation, so it kind of is dividing all of them. And the end of this episode, we see Archie and the other members of Red Circle. They record a video message threatening the Black Hood, and Hiram smiles as he watches the video in his study, and that's how this part of the episode ends. Now, as far as things go with Jughead, things are even more complicated there, because as we know, he is really starting to acquaint himself with all the serpents, and he gets heavily involved with them throughout this episode. Throughout the course of these 3 episodes, he gets more and more involved. He has to leave Riverdale, and him and Betty are becoming a bit more distant, especially when this girl Tony comes in the picture. This is his peer mentor. Immediately you can tell that this is someone who he's trying his best not to get attracted to, but she clearly is trying to lead him on. She talks about how the students are into jingle jangle, but he wants to be by himself. He wants to be an outsider. He's only really doing this, as we know, because of FP, and that's one of the things I love about this arc with Jughead, is that you could say that Jughead is going in the wrong direction, but at the same time, he's doing it for the right reasons. He's doing it because he wants to get justice for FP. He wants to get FP out of jail, and he's doing what he can, to make things work out for FP. Remember, that was the deal, that the serpents wouldn't harm FP if Jughead were to join them. So that's obviously what's going on here. He doesn't want to, but you see that he kind of has to. He doesn't really have much of a choice here, unfortunately. So that's really, what's kind of going on with him throughout this episode. You see that he's, like I said, they're him and Tony weed through the school paper room. He has Tony be a photographer for the paper. A group of servants arrive, but Jughead is still refusing to hang out with them, and Betty visits Jughead at the school paper. Jughead argues that the ghoulies are the source of Riverdale's drug trade, because there is, in fact, that drug jingle jangle going on, and Betty says she's worried about Jughead. They kiss, but they're interrupted by Tony, and Jughead awkwardly introduced them to each other, so you can already tell Tony's going to be a huge problem here. And again, I was a little bit worried about Tony's character at first, because it seemed like she was just here to stir up trouble between Betty and Jughead, but honestly, it makes a lot of sense. Obviously, the fact that Jughead is leaving Betty, you can understand that this is really starting to become a detriment, that this is really starting to hurt them overall. But I will admit, the stuff with Jughead, I wasn't the hugest fan of in this episode. It's not till the later episodes I got more into it, but he tries to get out of the school, but he only finds locked doors. He's getting beaten up, and Betty's in cleaning up his wounds, which he says he got from a motorcycle crash. She asks Tony to keep an eye on Jughead and leaves, and Jughead tells Tony that he was beaten up by the ghoulies, and he'll take his alliance with the serpents more seriously. So it seems like he's going to work with them, and that things are going to be okay with the serpents, and that's really how things end for him in this episode. And while I definitely enjoyed the first episode, the second episode easily is the best of the 3, and one of my favorite episodes, I think, of Riverdale yet. There's so much I love about this episode. It's extremely intense. The mood is just very high, and the need to get answers is already, the urgency is definitely present. And that's something I really loved about this episode, because immediately we see Jughead, he's giving us narration. There's definitely a serial killer in the town, and that everyone is pretty much set on finding them. And Mayor McCoy is putting up posters for an emergency town hall meeting. The River Vixens are shown. They're walking home in a group. Hal adds an extra lock to the Cooper family door. So everyone pretty much is paranoid that it's going to happen to them, and that the Black Hood is going to come after them. And it makes sense, because again, all of these characters have sins. All these characters have done things they're not proud of. So they have reasons as to why the Black Hood could target them. And I honestly really do love that. They could have easily just made this a very arbitrary type manner that, the Black Hood just coming after them because of this and this and this. But I like that it all boils down to each of them have sins, and the Black Hood seems to be coming after sinners. And that pretty much makes everyone a possible target. So Alice is writing on her computer. A package of the black and gold offices is addressed to Betty, and Archie is practicing shooting his gun in a field, and Archie really goes off the deep end in this episode. We see Veronica's parents ask about the video that Archie put online, and immediately Hermione says that Veronica should not date Archie. However, Veronica is not listening to that at all. She's very adamant about staying with Archie, and that she's going to stay with him until she feels that she no longer should. So I like that she has the higher ground here. She's telling them, no, I'm going to do what I want, and I really love that. And Camila Mendes, as usual, fantastic throughout all three of these episodes, especially once we get to the third one. We'll get to that, but she was still really great in all three of these episodes. Alice and Hal are also confronting Betty about Polly running away. Alice begins crying, saying she's terrified for Betty's safety, thinking that now that Polly's gone, that Betty is going to be possibly the next target. And Fred is asking Archie about the video. You see he's very concerned because he argues that the video now is making Archie a target because he is outright threatening the Black Hood, and he asks him to take it down. Archie said the original post of the video is down, but it keeps spreading regardless, so they really don't have much of a choice here. So basically, we then see Jughead. Jughead's plot actually does intertwine with this because the servants watch Archie's video, and Jughead confronts the servants about Archie's video. He's introduced to this character, Fangs Fogarty, who is tasked to bring Archie's head in as part of an initiation into the serpent. So Jughead reveals he knows Archie and that he isn't really a target, and the serpents should go after the Black Hood themselves. However, they, for some reason, want to go after Archie and think that he is a target, that they need to get rid of him. So Veronica tells Archie that her parents want her to break up with him. He asks for her support and reveals that Hiram suggested making the video in the first place, and he's called to the principal's office, and Weatherby basically tells him that, he dissolves the football team until Archie disbands the Red Circle and writes a letter apologizing to the town, because obviously this is just not going well at all. He's made things a lot more dramatic, and this definitely makes him public enemy number one, and you definitely do see that throughout this entire episode. So basically, we then see this letter. Betty receives this letter basically from Kevin. She shows Kevin the letter from the Black Hood saying that his killings are inspired by Betty. And this is very interesting. The Hood was inspired by Betty's words at the Jubilee, we find out. Remember, that whole speech was meant to, kind of fix the town and find a way to achieve inner peace and, get away from all of the violent violent outbreak that the town was really going through. But the letter also includes a cipher hinting at his next target, one that only Betty can really solve. And I love that Betty is very heavily involved in this. We know that Betty, she has experience of being a reporter, and she really gets involved with that in these two episodes, and there's some really juicy stuff for her. I was very worried that because of how much Betty had in the first season, this wasn't going to hold up, but that's definitely not the case. They still are giving Betty a very good amount of stuff to do, and I'm very happy about that. But she shows the cipher to Alice, who then shares it with Keller, and Alice reveals she published the cipher so that everyone can actually solve it. So basically, Reggie confronts Archie for what happened with the football team. He has Archie assign the letter, but Archie refused to back down for whatever reason. He's just not backing down, and it gets to the point where Archie is okay with himself dying. He doesn't care what he has to do. He wants to work with the Red Circle, and he reveals that the Red Circle actually did disband, and he's going after the Black Hood himself, which is a terrible idea. And again, I love that we see that Archie's really in over his head. I love that he's not making the right decisions. He's not in the proper headspace. It just shows that, sure, while he is our main character, he's not a hero. He's not yet. He's just not a hero. He's not making heroic decisions. He's taking the wrong advice, and I like how flawed he really is here. And I think, honestly, portraying him in this more rebellious way is very smart. I like that they're doing that with him, and even more than Jughead. I mean, you think that Jughead will get that arc, but no, Jughead is actually smarter than Archie here. He's the one who's trying to steer away from the serpents. He's the one who's doing it for his father. Archie just really isn't thinking straight at this point. He spray paints a red circle on buildings through the south side, Sweet Pea. The other servants are across Archie, so they're ready to just outright kill him. So Sweet Pea pulls a knife on Archie, but Archie pulls out his gun, and this isn't going to end well at all. Archie tells Fred that the Hood was actually Reggie's, and Fred gets upset, reveals that Archie scares him more than the Black Hood does, and I love that he told him that he's actually more afraid of Archie than the Black Hood, because he doesn't know what Archie's next step is going to be, what Archie's going to get himself involved in. I mean, it's just very dangerous ground that he's approaching, and Archie doesn't seem to understand how serious this really is. And he calls Veronica in the middle of the night, asking her to get something. She arrives at school, takes a gun out of the back of one of the school's toilets, and basically, Veronica confronts Archie about the gun. He reveals that he bought it because he's deliberately tempting the Black Hood so that he can kill him. And Veronica reveals that she threw the gun in Sweetwater River. Reggie and the football team arrive with pizza, so she does stop them from fighting pretty much. We get to the scene where it seems like it's going to be an all-out war, but luckily Veronica does stop it from happening. Fred and Alice argue about the serpents. Archie punches Sweet Pea in the face. The two groups begin fighting, but like I said, Dilton does end up getting stabbed actually by one of the serpents, but luckily Veronica it does stop things from going too far. She tends to his wounds. She apologizes for lying about the gun, and Archie wonders what he would have done if he had it, and Veronica reassures Archie that he isn't a killer. The two then begin kissing. Veronica pauses, realizing there's only one thing that they need to do, and that one thing, we don't really know what that is at this point. There's really the only thing they can do is to stay together, and that's really what they have to do here. So they throw the gun in Sweetwater River. That way no one can use the gun. It's not going to hurt anyone, which, basically Jughead talks about this night was a turning point for Riverdale. It became the town that pretty much dreaded sundown. This town was a lot darker. I mean, it was already dark, but it's even darker now, and we definitely do see that. Meanwhile, throughout the episode, Betty and Jughead are really trying to crack this code. They're trying to figure out what's really going on here, and we end the episode in a very intriguing way where Betty gets a call directly from the Black Hood. We don't know what that's about, but that perfectly leads us into the next episode. And this final episode I'm telling you guys about, it's honestly really tragic because much of it involves Betty pretty much being forced to lose everyone because the Black Hood, he calls her, and essentially the Black Hood is telling her that the two of them are very alike and she has to isolate a lot of her allies to prevent them from actually being harmed. And again, similar to Jughead, no, she's not making the best choices, but she's doing it for the right reasons. And we see throughout the episode, she's very hesitant in what to do. She goes to Archie, and Archie's in a better space in this episode. I don't know if Veronica was able to pull him out of it, but he's in a much more rational place where he really doesn't know what to do with this information. He's telling her, she should figure it out on her own, and that maybe she should just listen to the Black Hood, and that's essentially what Betty ends up doing here, especially when it comes to Jughead. Things get really bad between Betty and Jughead because the more that Jughead gets involved with the Serpents, which he gets very heavily involved, he kind of becomes an official member in this episode. Him and Tony get a lot closer. It does lead her to end up breaking up with Jughead, unfortunately, which was very sad, but also with Veronica. Things get really rough between these two. Remember, her and Kevin are already not on speaking terms, so things get even worse for her in this episode. Remember, she doesn't have Polly. Her and Alice aren't really on the best terms, but most of this episode involves Veronica, and there's this new guy, Nick, who basically he used to live where she did, and these two, used to date, and he's an old flame of hers, and you can tell immediately this guy's bad news. I mean, he's flirting with her, he's flirting with pretty much anything he sees, he's making a lot of really bad jokes, and she wants to host this party at her house, and things start off okay, they're at the party and everything, but things get kind of rough when you see Nick starts to make a bit of a pass at her. He starts to talk about, the past and things like that, and things do get rough between, Nick and Veronica quickly, and Betty makes things even worse, because Betty actually ends up getting drunk, and she pretty much calls Veronica out on a bunch of her bullshit and tells her that she's not really much of a friend, and that Veronica hasn't changed at all. And again, you can tell that Betty maybe does feel these things, but the reason it's coming out now is because she has to. It's not because she genuinely wants to not be friends with Veronica, it's because she has to protect Veronica, and it's very sad. Lili Reinhart, again, just amazing work, and I've praised her enough in this show, but really, she kills it in this episode. I absolutely loved what she did here. It's very tragic to see her just completely abandon all her friends, but again, she doesn't really have much of a choice here. She has to do what the Black Hood tells her, or else the Black Hood's going to target pretty much everyone around her, so she doesn't really have much of a choice, unfortunately. But things get even rougher. The next day, it seems like things are okay between Nick and Veronica. Nick talks about how he really has loved how much Veronica's changed, and they go to this party that Hiram and Hermione are hosting. Alice comes in wearing a lot of cleavage, and she also gets herself involved with what's going on. But things get really rough when Cheryl shows up, and her and Nick start to get really close. Cheryl gets really tipsy, and while Veronica's performing with the Pussycats, after the performance, one thing leads to another. Nick is very close to raping Cheryl, but they do end up beating the ever-living shit out of him, which was awesome to see, and Cheryl actually is unharmed, which I like seeing that, and it wasn't too heavy-handed. Like, they could have approached it in a very heavy manner, but they approached it in a way where it made sense for the story, and I did like that they took it in that direction. I thought it worked for the most part. I will admit it was a little heavy-handed, it was just a little too out of there. Like, it just kind of happened out of nowhere, but you knew Nick was bad news. You knew something was going to happen to him, and I wasn't surprised that they took it in that direction. And especially like that Cheryl was so casual with Nick, I knew that definitely was not going to end up well for her. So, needless to say, things do not really go well there. In terms of the end of the episode, like I said, Betty does end up unfortunately breaking up with Jughead. She really doesn't really have much of a choice here. He's going on his way with the serpents, and she's going on her way. And we end the episode with the Black Hood agreeing to what she's going to do, telling her that they are very similar, and that is the way this episode ends. So, like I said, guys, a lot of stuff to really consider within these 3 episodes. First of all, I really do want to talk about Betty, because I love where Betty is really headed here. I think this is definitely a very promising direction for her character. And again, it's different from Season 1. Season 1 was her. She was being a reporter. She was trying to investigate about Jason's killer. The difference is here, now she kind of is working with the Black Hood. And I know a lot of people have said this, but if it's actually true, we are supposed to meet Betty's brother this season, and we haven't. We still have yet to meet him, and, we don't know too much about Betty's brother and who he is and who he was connected to, but we know he is out there. We found out about him last season, and we know that he very much is alive. Who's to say he couldn't be, 30s or 40s? I mean, it's clear this guy, he's not a teenager. He definitely is he's very much an adult. I don't think he's probably no younger than like 30, and I think he very well could be, Betty's brother. So I think that could be who's actually targeting all these people. Now, why he's doing it, I don't know. Some people speculated it could be Hal as well. Now, I thought Hal was going to be the killer of Blossom last season, but we see that's definitely not the case. Obviously, we know the 2 families are now connected, which gives them more familiar connection, which, if I have to be honest, we haven't really seen much development in terms of that. Except for we got in episode 2, we haven't really seen much of a connection there. I mean, we haven't really seen them act any differently towards each other. That, meaning Betty and Cheryl. They haven't really acted that different towards each other. However, now that Betty has pretty much isolated everyone except for Archie, who's really the only one in the know about this, maybe this will get Cheryl and Betty to get closer. Maybe Cheryl's going to be the person that Betty's going to rely on. I don't know. I mean, I'm just speculating here, but the fact that she's lost Kevin, she's lost Veronica, she's lost Jughead, Cheryl's really the only one left that she hasn't abandoned yet. I mean, yeah, sure, there's Josie, but Josie has, like, nothing to do in this show. So, maybe that'd be cool if Josie had more to do. Maybe they give Josie a bigger arc, so to speak. But I think Cheryl is going to be the one to, maybe bond with Betty, but we'll have to see the way that really does turn out. As far as Archie, it seems like Archie kind of has calmed down. It seems like he definitely has kind of turned things around. He's realized that he does need to, really think about what he's doing, and that what he's doing could have an impact on the entire town. You definitely do see that here. He's approaching very dangerous ground. I think he very much is aware of that, and I definitely am liking where his direction is going. There's a lot of promising stuff with Archie going on right now, and I'm definitely all for it. I really am loving, and especially KJ Apa, he really is doing an incredible job this season. And then as far as Jughead goes, he's just getting himself more and more involved with the community of the Serpents. But again, similar to Betty, it's all because of FP. He's not doing it because he wants to. He's doing it because he has to. And there's a lot of stories like that we're seeing this season. I honestly really do love that. Really, my only complaint with these 3 episodes is one, Cheryl. Not really much for her to do, other than the fact she had that one thing with Nick. She doesn't really have much of an arc going on. I understand there's a lot going on this season, so, you can understand maybe they don't not giving her as much, but I do want to see Cheryl have more to do this season. I love the actress. I love what Madelaine Petsch does with this character. She's one of the best actresses on the show. In my opinion, she's one of my favorite characters on this show, and I really want to see her get more screen time. So I am hoping they give Cheryl more stuff to do, as well as they didn't really explain what happened with Archie. Like, why did he suddenly turn things around? They didn't really explain if Veronica was able to reel him in or what really happened there. Other than that, guys, I was very impressed by pretty much all 3 of these episodes. So now I'm going to rate each episode as a whole. So for Season 2, Episode 3, Chapter 16, The Watcher in the Woods, I would give that episode an A-. For Season 2, Episode 4, Chapter 17, The Drowned Dead Sundown, I would give that episode an A, easily one of the best episodes so far. And for Season 2, Episode 5, Chapter 18, Chapter 18, the one I just talked about, I can't think of the name right now, but I would give that episode an A- as well. And with that, guys, that's it. I'm now officially caught up on Riverdale. I'm well aware there was an episode tonight. I am going to try to do everything in my power to review that episode to you guys, but that's for this video. Hope you enjoyed the most, guys. Thought of these 3 episodes overall. I am really loving Riverdale this season. I was worried they were going to have a sophomore slump, but it's clear to me they're taking things in a much more darker direction. I'm definitely all for it. I'm loving where the season is going, and I just hope they can maintain this quality because it really is great right now, and I'm hoping that it sticks to be, as riveting as it really is. But that's my review. Hope you enjoyed. See you guys in my next video, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.